bienvenidos to
Merendiando,
part of Radio Aluna Theater. Our guest today is Mariló Núñez.
Mariló Núñez is a Chilean Canadian director and playwright based in Hamilton, Ontario. She was the founding artistic director of Alameda Theatre Company, a company dedicated to developing the new work of Latinx Canadian playwrights. Mariló is the 2018 recipient of the Hamilton Arts Award for Established Theatre Artist, among many other scholarships and accolades.
She's currently obtaining her PhD in Theatre and Performance Studies from York University. And she is a current playwright in residence at Aluna Theater.
In this interview, we talked about Latinx identity in North America, the Fornés writing method, and her insights on developing a playwriting practice.
Mariló is also the writer of our next studio series presentation, El Retorno, a play that explores family, exile, and revolution, and journeys into the heart of Latin American history. This studio series presentation is directed by Aluna's artistic director, Beatriz Pisano. Bea recently directed another radio play by Argentinian playwright Griselda Gambaro, called The Walls, where one of Argentina's most fearless writers holds a mirror to state terrorism that still echoes today. You can listen to it right now as part of Salt Peppers Theater's company Around the World in 80 Plays program. Link is in the show notes. Now, let's jump into our conversation with Mariló.
Thank you so much for being on this podcast with us. We have been thinking about interviewing you for a long time because we've had the pleasure of spending quite a bit of time with you this year in some playwriting workshops, and you are currently Aluna's playwright in residence, which is amazing. And we're going to roll back the tape a little bit, go a few years behind us, and ask you about Alameda Theatre Company. So you founded and created this company, and Alameda Theatre was one of Canada's only theatre companies dedicated to developing the new work of Latinx Canadian playwrights. So it seems like developing new work has been important to you for a very long time. So why was this so important to you when you started Alameda?
Well, I started Alameda because of what had happened with the refugee hotel. Mm-hmm. I could get into that, but people can read about what happened. Mm-hmm. So it was anger that kind of spurred me to start the company. And then I realized that the only way for Latinx artists in Canada to kind of get to the same level as everybody else was to be the kind of creators of our own stories and be in the driver's seat. Mm-hmm. So because I love playwriting and I love writing, I really wanted a company that I would have loved to have had be around when I was young. Yeah. So I created a company that would give opportunities to Latinx artists, both as writers, directors, actors, designers. I wanted a company that would place us in the center stage. And so I got the help of my good friends Stephen Colella and Erica Capito. They helped me to develop the first Playwrights Festival, De Colores. And so we started De Colores in 2008, I think, 2008. And we started with 2 plays. And the first play was Blue Box by Carmen Aguirre, and a play by, oh my God, his name escapes me right now.
Was it Lizard Boy?
Lizard Boy.
Gomez?
Yes.
Wow. Look it up. Google, thank you.
Thank you for that. So we started with those 2. And what was amazing was I had no idea about running a festival, but these 2 dramaturgs worked one-on-one with the playwrights. And at the end of the year, so we gave each playwright a year of development with one-on-one sessions with the dramaturgs. We opened it to the public to hear the work in progress. They were never finished plays. They were always works in progress. And from the first year, we had like 50 people show up. I don't know how. 50 people showed up, and a lot of people were from our community, the Latino community. And it was amazing because we got a lot of feedback saying, wow, I'd never been to a play reading before. This was so interesting. It's like being read a story and you're creating the images in your head, and it's such a beautiful kind of way to connect with the playwright and the actors. So I hired actors to do the reading, and yeah, it was great. And so we had a De Colores festival every year until I closed the company in 2014.
That's so much new work. That's so
Yeah, we developed the work of we developed over 40 plays.
wow.
Wow.
Yeah,
That is
it was really
Oh.
good. It was really good. And, when I closed down the company, I had to close it down for personal reasons. And I was just burnt out. I couldn't do it alone anymore. Um, I felt the lack of that help in our community. And so did Aluna. Like, Bea called me and said, we feel the loss of that company because it was such an important part of the development of new work.
Mm-hmm.
Like young playwrights like people who had never written a play before came to me saying, I want help. I need you to help me. And so, it was a learning curve. And every year we had to kind of teach playwrights how to write plays. And some were established playwrights. And so they also got the benefit of being in community, being with, having the actors from the community. It was really beautiful.
Mm-hmm. And having a culturally specific theater company as well feels like its own challenge, even just beyond developing new work.
What was interesting was that a lot of the Latino community in Canada is quite new, a lot of new immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
They had never been to the theater in their own countries. So they were like, why would I go to the theater here where, it's probably in English? And so we were thinking like Aluna as well. We were thinking, okay, we need to start doing the 2 languages maybe. But I did convince people to come, people who had never been to the theater in their home countries. And they were blown away by the experience. They were like, wow, this is really amazing. There were so many elements, right? There was like trying to fundraise within our community was really hard, right? Like our community is so new and so young, so it doesn't have a lot of deep pockets or people with a lot of wealth that could become donors. But what I did do was start campaigns that would be like $25, $5. And so I got a lot of donations for a little bit of money.
Mm-hmm.
So that was interesting because the people felt invested in the community and in the company. And so I did get donations, which was great.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Challenges of running any theater company. But when it's specific to a culture, there are things that you have to navigate and things that you have to learn along the way. Like I learned so much. I didn't know so many things when I started it. And then by the end of it, I was like, okay, now I'm starting to understand my community a little bit more. Our community is made up of so many different countries, right? So the Chileans were different than the Colombians, than the Venezuelans, than the Mexicans. Like it was very, very different.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to learn to navigate the different needs.
Yeah.
I was reading also some of the names that did like the writer, the show that you develop, and it's like from Marta Chavez, which is like a comedian superstar, and then I know Isaac Louis from improv.
Yes.
But then you have like Rosa Laborde, which is like an amazing playwright. Carlos Bellis, it's like Juan Carlos Bellis. So it's like now if you see people, I'm like, you were all in the same festival, but most of us know you from like really different pockets of art in the city. So that's like really amazing.
At the time that you were running this company, who were your inspirations at the time? Like, did you have any other kind of artists that you were really looking to internationally or anywhere that were inspiring you?
Yeah, I have to say, INTAR in New York, their playwrights festival that they had that was run by María Irene Fornés was, even when I started the company, I knew about this company and I knew what they were doing. And I eventually, like in the 2 years prior to me closing down the company, I was already applying for grants to be able to create kind of like a Fornesian model here. But I didn't, what's so funny is that I didn't feel confident enough then to be the one to run the workshop. So I was looking at people who I could hire to come in and do it.
Mm-hmm.
And now, so many years later, I'm like, no, I have the experience to be able to run these things. So even back then, I was thinking about Fornés. A lot of the American Latinx playwrights inspired me a lot because they're like 50 years ahead of us, right? So their body of work is so huge, and they're really, really talking about what it means to be Latino in North America.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel that the Canadians still don't know where we're at in terms of our writing and how we're exploring theater as Latinx theater artists. I still feel we're a little bit like on the kind of emerging side of that long line of playwrights, right? Like I think, so I looked at people like Nilo Cruz, Migdalia Cruz, Cheri Moraga, Caridad Speech, Luis Alfaro, like all of these big playwrights in the US really inspired me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the theater landscape in the US and here is very different. And the amount of Latinx people in the States also is just completely different. So that's definitely a question I also ask often, being like, what is the Canadian Latin American identity? Like, what do we have to say that's specific to us and our experience?
And I think the group that we had when I ran the first Fornés workshop with Aluna, I think that's where we're starting to like explore that, right? Like, the stuff you guys did was amazing. And so, and it really showed like the variety of ideas, the diversity of ideas, and the things that you're all thinking about, right? Like right now at this moment, this is what you're all thinking about. And that's important.
What did you learn about new play development during your time at Alameda?
That it's an ongoing process, that like some people start with nothing, with no knowledge of what a play is or how to write a play, and some people have years of experience, but the journey of writing a play still takes you from one place to the, like, by the end of the journey you will have something. But it's never finished, right? Like a play is never finished until it goes into production and it gets a staged production. But even then, it's still not finished. And so as playwrights, we're constantly having to navigate and negotiate that, right? Like at some point you have to like go and say, okay, I'm not going to continue writing this play anymore. I'm going to move on to the next one. That sounds very hard. It is hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's what I learned, is that for each playwright, the journey is unique. And so as a new play developer or as a dramaturg or as a director, you have to, gear towards each person specifically, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody's so unique. Everybody is so talented in their own way, right? Like my daughter, Emma, the other day, she made this beautiful painting. And then beautiful painting. And then she showed me her friend's painting and said, why is mine not as good as hers? And I said, you can't actually compare the two. One is an orange and one is an apple. You can't at all compare.
Yeah.
Everybody is so unique.
Yeah. Ugh, that's very brave and humbling at the same time to hear. Like, it's brave to try to pursue that. And then it's also just like, I feel like you constantly have to check your own anxiety and fear to let the art come through.
Totally.
So after closing Alameda, what happened?
It's interesting. I went through a period of mourning, obviously. It was very hard to close that company. And so I was trying to figure out, so what do I do next? Like, my identity was so linked to Alameda. And I was like, how am I going to reinvent myself and be the artist that I've always wanted to be? And so, looking through old journals from 15 years ago, I saw an entry that said, I really, really want to do my MFA in creative writing. And so I was like, why don't I just do that? Like go back to school, do what I've always wanted to do, which is write, give myself the permission, because when I was running Alameda, I couldn't be an artist. I had to be an administrator. I had to be the person in charge, running things, producing things. And so I felt like I was, giving great opportunities to other people. But in the back of my head was but what about my artist? What about me? And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna give myself that. And so I applied for school. I got in to the University of Guelph's MFA Creative Writing program. And it was the best 2 years that I could have given myself, because it was 2 years dedicated to just writing. I wrote 6 plays in 2 years. I also wrote short stories. I wrote poems and so many things. And I learned so much about how to be a writer, that it takes dedication and you have to do it every day. And that every writer has a different approach to writing. And the conversations around writing and books, and it was so beautiful. I loved my 2 years at Guelph. And then during that time is when I also started thinking, okay, I can't completely get rid of the person I was through Alameda. I can't completely get rid of that need to help the community, to be part of the community, to continue to develop new work. So how can I do this? So I called Bea and I was like, Bea, how can we work together so that we continue some form of new play development? I've been working with artists in the States doing the Fornés method, and I really feel that I want to bring that here. I want to bring that to Canada. In 2018, I went to Chicago. I did the 2-week Latino playwrights workshop, which was life-changing. There was something so beautiful about being in a room with 14 other Latinx writers from, different kind of experiences, different places in North America, and writing from that. You understand that because you were both part of the Fornés workshop. So writing from community, writing from that place of, this beautiful, special space, right? And so that's I became really passionate about trying to bring that here to Canada, because I still believe that that's one of the best ways forward, is to give the writing power to the writer. The writer can change everything, right? The writer can change a reality through their work. And so I believe that giving that power to our community as writers will help us to move forward.
I'm so grateful you did, because those workshops changed my relationship to writing too. Like suddenly it felt like something that was coming from me, my whole self, and not like a story, a good story I had to tell. Like it was so authentic. It felt really authentic to write.
I love, because I felt the different than Camila. I felt like I always told my truth, and now I was able to change it.
Hey, yeah. Take what
yeah.
So that really, I that really talks about what you were saying. Is like as writers that we have different tools. Is like it's always so personal, the choices you make as a writer. Like with all the knowledge you might gather, it's always a process is always going to be different for each writer, which I think it's something that I have learned during the Fornés method, seeing other people also react to the prompts. Like we all get the same prompt, but everybody reacts differently. It's always like,
totally.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
So for you, Mariló, when you're writing now, what are some elements of a successful writing session for you? Like what do you need to help you have a good session, and what makes a successful writing session?
Music.
Yeah.
Like it's such a big part of my process. Like when I know that I have to finish a piece, I first put on a playlist, and I will move around in my room here.
Yeah.
Physically getting warmed up, and physically, meditation also helps as well. And then just when when it's just so, you're so in it and you're so free and you're not thinking about anything else but the story, that's the magic for me, is when you're just so in it and you don't want to stop. That's the magic.
And what's on your writing playlist right now?
So I'm writing Foxy right now, which is my new play, and it's set in the 90s, so when I was a teenager. And so a lot of the music that is on my playlist is like 90s hip hop, a lot of cheesy 80s love power ballads. And then a lot of like salsa from the 70s and 80s.
Okay, that sounds like a very powerful playlist right now.
Many decades.
Many decades, yeah.
Awesome. Do you have any advice for someone who's beginning to write a new play? What would you say? Get a good playlist.
It's such a scare. It's yeah. Get a good playlist. Yeah, music is an excellent way in, right? Like, choose songs that really, really move you, that really inspire you, that really make you want to kind of express yourself. Writing a new play is such a scary thing, and when you don't know how to do it, you feel overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
So I say, reach out to people in the community that you know could help you. Like when I first started, I reached out to Night with Theater. I applied to their Groundswell Festival, and I learned so much in that first year of writing a play. Yeah, and like aligning yourself with somebody that you trust, somebody that you can be messy with, that you can be emotional with, that you can like be shitty writing with,
Yeah.
You have to allow yourself to be a bad writer in order to become a better writer. That's the biggest lesson I've learned, is that the first drafts are gonna be bad, right? The first drafts, and you have to allow yourself to write a really bad first draft. Yeah, I completely believe that.
Those are great tips. Those are great. And not isolating yourself. Exactly. Finding that group. That's something I've learned with you too, through the Fornés workshops. Like you can, it's so much easier when you have other people to be like, I'm terrified with, versus just being terrified on your own desk by yourself.
Yeah, because writing is such a solitary thing, that knowing that you have people who will have your back makes you feel less lonely, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking there's no better feeling when you write something that it makes no sense and you're reading it out loud and the other person is like, no. And you were like, got it. I knew it, but I needed to say it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Totally.
Because you have studied different methodologies and styles. How do you choose which tools to use and when you're developing a new play?
What's interesting is that, as a dramaturg, when I work with new playwrights who don't know how to write plays, it's hard for me to start in on the Fornés method right away, because the Fornés method, it's very random at first, and you're like, well, I don't understand this process. I don't understand where this is taking me. I'm writing things that I didn't even think I'd be writing. And so if you have like a specific thing that you want to write about, there is something to the Aristotelian and the very Canadian theater way of writing plays, which is to create kind of like an event, like the biggest events of your story.
Mm-hmm.
Like say you want to write about, the day your parents got a divorce and how that affected you and the events that happened after, the repercussions of that. So you could write the specifics about that day that your parents got a divorce, just in like freehand, and say, I woke up and I knew something was going to happen. Like just really kind of allow your imagination to go and to be open to that. So doing the events helps because it helps you to see the story on a larger scale. But when you're working with Fornés, a lot of the stories that come to you are not pre-planned. So then what you start to recognize is the characters that keep coming back in your writing. And then you add the structure. That's when you start to build the kind of, okay, so these three people keep coming up in my scenes. What am I going to do now? So then you can start the events and you can start creating your own event and letting your imagination go with that. Right? The Fornés method is not about structure at first. It's about allowing the characters who live within you to come out. Like a new writer will always want to write a play because they have a very specific idea. They have a very specific thing that they want to write about. Mm-hmm. Whereas more established writers, they do have specific things that they want to write about, but they can benefit from the Fornés method in that it allows them to explore, right? The Fornés method is a lot about exploring what's in you, what are possibilities that you can write about, whereas pre-planning, so like it's two forms of writing, and everybody is unique and everybody should try both things, right? Like I think you shouldn't just get stuck in one way. I think you should be open to creating an outline. Sometimes some writers really benefit from creating an outline, whereas other writers just begin by writing the first line and then seeing what happens. And I say, be open to whatever you feel you need, and explore, right?
Speaking of exploring and Fornés method and sense memory and all these things, next week, an audio version of your play El Retorno is being released. And El Retorno is based from your own family's journey and some lived experiences that you have been able to draw from. So did you use Fornés techniques to create this piece?
No, not at all.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
I know. And I wonder what kind of play it would have been if I had used Fornés techniques. No, this play I wrote way before I started working in the Fornés method. So how I approached this play was because it was like my second biggest play that I had written, that I was going to write. I really wanted to explore verbatim theater. And so I interviewed my dad for 2 years. So I started writing this play in 2015, and we would meet once a week or once every 2 weeks. And I would just press record and we would just talk. And I would ask him questions. I would, say, okay, so let's talk about Bulgaria, or let's talk about, when you got arrested in Chile, or let's talk about, when you got married to mom, stuff like that. And so that would lead to like these very long, and we'd have once, we'd have tea with, bread, and we'd be, we'd both be crying or we'd both be laughing. It was a very beautiful time with my dad. And so after I felt like I had enough stuff, I then transcribed all of these. I wrote them all out in Spanish, and then I had to translate them into English. And then I had to put the play together, trying to see so it was like a puzzle. I was trying to put a puzzle together. And my first draft of the play was verbatim. It was exactly what my father had said. It was a daughter and a father sitting at a table talking. And I thought, oh my God, is that going to bore people? But what was interesting is that I was part of the Tarragon playwrights unit at that time. And the writers in that room, it was a lot of dialogue. It was a long play. And I kept asking that question, is like, are you bored? And they're like, no, it's like listening to a conversation. It's like being a fly on the wall of this father and daughter. But then, as I developed it more, I realized, okay, I need to put some structure into this thing. I need to invent some things in order to make this play work. And so I had to create a lot of things that didn't actually happen in order to create an arc for the characters, in order to create a story that would take us from a beginning to an end. But there's a part of me that wishes that I had the Fornés method to see what would have come.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess that's always a dance when it's a real story. Like where is the craft and the artistry, the invention, and then where is the truth that like punches you, which is the reason you want to tell that story, and how do you navigate all of that? So Yeah, good for you, because the finished play is beautiful. And I'm really excited for everyone to hear it. But the more that I hear it, I'm like, I want a full movie of this. Like, I would love to see it.
After I wrote the play and I staged it, and I thought it was done. I thought that was it. That that was it. And so I decided that I was going to write the novel of the story, like to create the novel.
Yes.
And so I'm still thinking about that. I've written a few chapters here and there, and again, I've had to invent a lot, because in order to make the story make sense for the reader, there's things that I have to fill in that I was not there for. That So it's an interesting process. And then to do the radio version was a completely different experience as well.
Let's talk about that. How was that process of adapting this play from stage to audio?
It's interesting because in the stage version, I really wanted a lot of movement and puppetry and like visuals that you can't see on the radio, like you can't at all. And so in the play version, there were moments when the kids were playing, but it was like shadow puppetry in the background, while there was like complicated movement sequences that were choreographed by Olga Barrios. And the idea with those pieces, those like movement pieces, was to tell the story of Latin America through a child's perspective. So colonization, then when there were the revolutions that happened all over Latin America trying to break from the monarchy. And then there was the dictatorships that started to happen. And then, so I wanted to tell that story, then eventually to get to the very specific Chilean dictatorship, but told through the eyes of children and in movement and puppetry. So then I was like, okay, how do I tell that on the radio? And that's when I thought, okay, well, I'll just make them talk out the playing. Like they'll be saying, okay, we could do this and then we can do that. Because I remember as a kid, when we would be preparing to play house or we had to kind of set the rules. Yep. We had to say, okay, so that's going to be, because it was all in our imagination and nothing was real. We had to kind of build the world around us before we could play. So that's what I decided to do for the audio version.
It sounds really good. And everybody who's listening, after this interview, if you're like, I want to know, you just need to wait one more week and you will know.
And you're going to get the play in English and in Spanish. So that's also very cool.
Oh, yes.
So you got your master's in creative writing, and now you're at York University getting your PhD. So you keep just diving in to the learning. Can you tell us more about what your research focus is?
So after I did my MFA, I really did not want to return to being an administrator in the theater world. I was like, I really do not want to do that. So I have to, I feel like I have to train myself more in order to be able to get a job that I would love. And so, and also the advocacy part of me was still very, very strong. When I started at Alameda, it was all about advocacy and creating opportunities and fighting the system and all of that. And so I thought, okay, how can I do that with a PhD? How can I do that? And so I applied with my research topic was race and racism in Canadian theater. And, I'm in my second year now, and I realized that that's such a big, big topic that I could not possibly write a dissertation paper on that big of a topic. I wanted to tackle the institutions. I wanted to tackle casting. I wanted to tackle, the impact on the actor who's a person of color and what that does to them when they are working in the professional world as theater artists. Like all of that I wanted to tackle. But then I did this course last summer, and it was an independent study where I could create my own course. I could do whatever I wanted. And so I thought, okay, well, why don't I get somebody to teach me how to do the Fornés method? And so I did. So I called up my friend in Chicago, and I said, She's a professor at Northwestern University, and I said, "Can you teach me? Can I be your student and I can help you as your assistant, whatever you need? Can you teach me how to do this? Can we like meet weekly to talk about Fornés?" And she said, "Absolutely." So we spent 2 months meeting weekly, and I read every book that there is on Fornés. I studied the method, like she would like break it down, and we studied the method. And then I realized that I really want to look at the issue of race from the writer's perspective. Mm-hmm. So what does it mean to write race? Like, what is universality in literature and in theater and plays in North America? What does that mean? Because, when you go to school, you're taught, you're reading books and they're all from a white point of view. Most of the books that I read when I was in elementary school were from a white point of view. Mm-hmm. And so what does it mean when a writer of color starts to write about their specific place? Why is that not universal? Why is that not considered universal yet? Right? So looking at race through the writer's lens, and then incorporating the Fornés method as a method of fighting the system. Like, right now, we are taught how to write plays in a very Western European way. And even though Fornés was also trained in a very Western European way, she kind of broke the system. And she was like, I have no idea how to write a play, so I'm going to invent it. And so she took things from the Western canon and from the Western European mindset, but then created this completely new way of writing. And it's all about community. And to me, the way to solve the race issue is about community. And so how do we as writers connect to that community and connect to that place within us that allows us to write our truth, allows us to write the stories that are not being told, and allows us to be at the same level as everybody else, so that universal becomes a different thing.
Yes. Yes, I'm very excited for you. I can't wait to even ask you about it in a year when you've done more research and stuff on it, because this is powerful. That's really powerful.
Everything you're saying, I just take a minute because I'm thinking about it, being like, yes, how did I learn to write a play? How did I write a play? Why did I write a play?
Exactly. These are the questions I think that are important. What's that saying? That the pen is the most powerful tool for change, or something like that. Like, I think the writer has so much power to change realities, to change, like, writing is revolutionary. And so if we're going to change the conversation about race and racism in North America, because I feel that it's a very North American topic. If you go to Latin America, they're like, what are you talking about? We don't have, we're not talking about race in Latin America. Mm-hmm. There is racism. There should be conversations about race, but there isn't.
Yeah.
They just do the work. And a lot of it is based in a Western ideology as well. Mm-hmm. So, but I'm looking at North America, and I'm looking at people of color, and I'm looking at indigenous writers, and I'm looking at specifically the Latinx community. How do we create our work, and why do we create it in this way? And what does it mean to write about from our perspective? And what does it mean for a writer from another culture to write about me, for example, to write about a Latinx character? What does that mean? Mm-hmm. Because look, when I wrote a play called Inquest, where none of the characters are Latinx at all. But they could be. In casting, you could make them Latinx or from all different cultures. But I was like, okay, how do I enter this story that is not about specifically the Latinx experience? The caseworker in the case of the story that I was writing was actually Chilean. The more research I did, she was Chilean. And I was like, okay, that's my way in, but she's not my main character. So how do I write characters that are white or indigenous, or do I have the right to write them or not? Like, so these are questions that are very, very, very relevant right now.
Yeah, totally.
But we should also be given the freedom. Like, you know that when you're writing in the Fornés method, you can't actually control what your characters are saying or who they are.
Yeah.
So it's very, very interesting to me.
Yeah, that's so interesting because it's like, how do you trust your imagination, but then also put it in the public eye, which is like one of the powers of theater. Like everyone's just going to see it and have their own different reactions to it. And all of that feeds back into the idea of race too, because like you said, writers shape so many things, our realities.
Totally.
So yeah, how do you be responsible with that, but also free, also an artist?
Free.
Yeah.
Free, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Woof, wow.
So talking about creating new realities, another project you're working on right now is Foxy, Tales of an Urban Zorra. And we want to know, what have you learned about from this piece about what is your place in the world as a Latina?
Because from the description of the show that we read, you're working a lot with stereotypes, like about female Latinx, Latina women. And those are, I think we're all really familiar with them. So yeah, what have you learned about your own place in the world as a Latina?
That's a tough question. So writing the play, I've really tried to explore the different aspects of a Latina woman. And so there are 5 female characters. So one of them is, for example, the Latina lover, kind of very sexual, very sensual, she's supposed to be very beautiful. And, you know, what you see in Hollywood films of the very voluptuous, beautiful. And so then there's the mother, there's the virgin, there's the daughter, and then there's the chola gangster kind of revolutionary.
Yeah.
And what's funny is that a lot of these stereotypes are not from my specific culture, from Chile.
Yeah.
They're from like a Mexican reality or a North American Latinx reality, right? And so, but this is what I've been fed, and I think this is what all of us have been fed. The movies that we watch about our community, about Latinos, have these stereotypes, and so they become ingrained in you, and you kind of relate to them because they're kind of like you, and it's the only thing that you see. So I'm kind of exploring the broad Latina stereotype, not specifically Chilean, not specifically Mexican, kind of like a mix of all of the things. So I'm also exploring the quinceañera, which is a very important coming of age celebration in many Latin American countries. And then I'm also exploring La Llorona, the myth of La Llorona, and the kind of overprotective mother that we all have come in contact with. Like I think our mothers, at least my mother, and a lot of this play is based on my mother. The overprotective, the very jealous, the very intense Latina woman. But then I'm also adding in my own personal story as well. So the story of when I was in my teens and the trauma that I experienced and how that has kind of shaped who I am right now. So yeah, so there's a mix as well. And so what have I learned about myself? I'm still in the process of learning.
Yeah.
Because now, now I'm a mother. And so how do I, and I sometimes feel myself becoming that stereotypical Latina mother. And then other times I'm not, and I try to be the more kind of North American helicopter kind of parent. I have to say I'm still learning. I'm still learning.
Yeah, that's great. But even just the distinction of that you made, that these stereotypes are like a North American view on the Latinx people that are here, I think that's a huge kind of light bulb in that exploration, because yeah, it's not universal. Again, it's like you're kind of finding the roots of where these ideas come from.
Yeah, totally.
I had a casting for selling tortillas, like a commercial, and then literally the description was, we're looking for an authentic accent and an authentic like Latina woman. Think Sofia Vergara.
There you go. There you go.
That was what reminds me, is like most of the casting descriptions when they look mostly in commercial settings for TV and stuff like that are super specific to North American view of what a Latina woman.
Yeah, like I think about movies like from the 90s that really kind of affected me because I wasn't seeing any movies about my experience as a kid. So you have movies like Blood In, Blood Out, American Me, and they're Los Angeles based, right? The LA kind of vato and all of that, and the women in those movies, I was always so intrigued by them. They were like these gangster, tough girls, but they were so beautiful, and there was a tenderness to them, and then there was a really hard side. Like,
yeah,
I love that, and I was like, I relate to that because there's a part of me that is that, right? Yeah, like I believe in every stereotype there is a grain of truth, right?
But when you put that person in Southern Ontario for like 30 years, what happens to that person? Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when I was 16, around the time where I'm basing this play, I was part of a group of Chilean girls, and we would go clubbing every weekend, even though we weren't allowed to. Um, and there was the feeling of a little bit of a gang. Like there were the Chilean guys that hung out with us, and we were like a group of Chilean girls. And then sometimes somebody else would come into the group for a bit, but there was always this collective of us, and we smoked, and we wore the clothes that was so cool. and we would watch these movies, and we'd be like, yeah, that's us, like we're like these cool Latina girls.
Yeah, I feel like you have to do a lot of like you have to work your brain to see that and be like, it's me, because obviously there's lots of similarities, but it's like, we're not in LA, but we're gonna make that here. Like I need to bring that reality to me because I want to feel seen,
because there was nothing else. There was no other reality for us at that time.
Yeah.
And it, being part of that little group kind of made you special.
Yeah.
You felt special. You felt part of something that was just like ours. When I would walk down the street, like the hallway of my high school, I felt kind of cool because I was like, I'm kind of claiming my roots, and even though they're not my roots, but it was, it's a very weird thing.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. It's you against the world, basically, because the world around you is not affirming that part of you. Yeah. Every episode, we ask our current guest to pose a question to the next guest so we can keep the conversation going across borders and languages. And you are being asked 2 questions by our guests from the last episode, which are the hosts of the Nostalgique podcast. So Nostalgique podcast is about like the reminiscing about the pop stars of yesterday. And I feel like this is actually a really good pairing because your like vision of pop culture and your appreciation of it, I think this is going to be great. So Abba and Ben are the hosts. And Abba has one question for you, which is, Mariló, what is your ideal Sunday?
Yeah, my ideal Sunday is being allowed to sleep in a little bit.
Yeah.
And then going down to the kitchen and making pancakes for my family. And so we share pancakes. And then going for a hike with my daughters, my husband, and my dog. And then just having a very lazy, like I don't have to do any work. I don't have to turn on my computer. Just having a lazy day, hanging out with my children and my husband.
That sounds very ideal.
And our second question is from Ben. And Ben was thinking about celebrities and fame and how many comedians' dreams is to make it big in like the States. And he wanted to know, how do you create art free of ego beyond the idea of success?
This is a question, it is a big one. And I think I've asked myself, because when I was younger and I wanted to be an actor, my dream was to the Oscars. I wanted to get an Oscar, or I wanted to be recognized with awards, recognized in that way. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that it is important to be recognized by your community, to have people say, yes, you're good enough to to be winning this award because your work is good enough. But at the end of the day, it's about staying power. Like I believe that the people who stay not because of the awards and not because of the accolades and not because of recognition, but stay because of the work, because the work is what you love more than anything. I think that's the most important thing. And so doing it because you can't do anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And the ego is we all have it. We all want to be recognized for our work. But like I said, the story I was saying about my daughter earlier,
mm-hmm.
You can't compare yourself to anybody else. There's nobody else in the world like you. So there's no reason for you to say, well, why did they get it and I didn't? It has nothing to do with you. It's just luck or whatever. So you just have to have faith that your work is valid and that it will, if you stick with it, it will go out into the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's really good. Combining the self-affirming with doing that long enough to stick it out, I think is the key. Yeah. Because
the more you do something, the better you get at it.
Yeah.
Right?
And now we'll ask you to ask a question to a fellow artist in the Americas. And what would that question be?
What is your favorite word?
Ooh.
And why?
Okay, writer.
No, I was looking at I used to watch the Actor Studio.
Oh yeah.
That. And so at the end he would always ask
mm-hmm.
these questions to the person being interviewed. And I thought, those are such fun questions. So I chose one of those.
Yes, I love that.
What's your favorite word and why?
So, as you know, this podcast is called Merendiando, which means snack time in North Mexican Spanish. Very specific. We're getting more specific as we go. We're learning. So, Mariló, what is your favorite snack right now? It could be a dish or food or music or a book, anything that's actually just fueling you and that you want to share with our listeners. A snack for the soul.
Okay, so when COVID hit, my husband and I, everybody went through a depression and, oh my God, we're stuck in the house. And there's a thing that happens in the east coast of Canada when there's huge blizzards. There's a saying, we need to go and get the COVID chips.
Yes.
So we got a lot of COVID chips during the first months of the pandemic. So chips, I really like a good chip.
Okay, I love that. Do you have any particular brand or flavor that's...
Yes. At Costco, they sell a Himalayan salt. Can't remember the name of the chip. It's a white bag and it says Himalayan salt.
Yeah.
And what I love about them is that they're really thick and crunchy.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not flimsy. They're like a really thick, crunchy and salty chip.
Right. So when you bite into one, you really have to, it just takes your whole focus.
It takes your whole...
And if you eat them enough, you can forget what's going on.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Mariló. Thank you so much for sharing some of your brain and your thoughts with us today.
Thank you so much.
We are speaking to you from the shores of this beautiful Zagaigan, known to some as Lake Ontario, in Toronto, or Dougarondo. This is the ancestral territory of the Haudenosaunee, or Longhouse Confederacy, the Anishinaabeg Nation, the Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum and Treaty 13, also known as the Toronto Purchase.
At Aluna, we remember that people can begin to heal when they are hurt. We are committed to artful participation in disagreements. We are committed to unsettling ourselves towards connection, respect, and justice for all people who now live in this city, which has been a meeting place since time immemorial.
Radio Aluna Theatre is produced by Aluna Theatre, with support from the Toronto Arts Council, the Ontario Arts Council, the Canada Council for the Arts, the Department of Canadian Heritage, and the Metcalfe Foundation.
Aluna Theatre is Beatriz Pisano and Trevor Shelness, with Sue Ballant. Radio Aluna Theatre is produced by Mónica Garrido and Camila Díaz Varela. For more about Aluna Theatre, visit us at alunatheatre.ca, follow at Aluna Theatre on Twitter or Instagram, or like us on Facebook.
Miigwech and Nyawangoa.